one of our partners out of Indiana. And we're here today to talk to you guys a little bit about this marketplace and the tools and solutions that Fifth Gear provides to give you insight into some trends in the e-commerce and distribution areas that we're seeing and that our other customers are taking advantage of. Just a quick introduction. My name is Derek Jacobson. I'm the Vice President at Levementum, and I'm the Practice Director for our e-commerce practice. My contact information is available, and we'll be sending everyone a copy of these materials after the webinar is concluded today. Just a few words about Levementum. We'll keep it very short because we want to spend our time today focused on the subject at hand, which is outsource, managed order fulfillment, and other services. Levementum is, we are a consulting and professional services firm. We focus on e-commerce, CRM, sales, and customer service applications, and we partner with a number of the largest, most successful firms in these areas, including Magento Enterprise, Salesforce.com, Sugar CRM, and Fifth Gear. We traditionally focus on B2B, multi-channel, multi-product line, multiple sales approach opportunities for organizations. And so we work with companies like Fifth Gear, helping our customers focus on not just the online sales, but the entire operation, front of the house to the back. And so hence we wanted to make sure everyone had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about this subject. In terms of what we're going to go through today, we're going to introduce you to Fifth Gear and Managed Fulfillment Services, give you the background of what it is, why it's important, how this is shaping the current industry and the value that comes from merchants who look into this path. We have an expert on with us today, and we're going to have a little bit of an Ask the Expert session to provide you more insight into what this is as opposed to just generic boilerplate communication. And of course, if you have questions along the way, please feel free to submit them through the chat console. We'll make sure they're either answered directly on the call or we can follow up with you offline afterwards, whichever you desire. Just from our view, to give you some context about this subject, one of the things that I see consistently, and the reason we wanted to have this webinar and have this discussion with you, is that the current marketplace is really focused heavily on driving order volume with a controlled, managed cost model on fulfillment, on customer service, on value-add services like branding and embroidery and things like that. And we're seeing an increased number of merchants come to us who recognize that as they're successful selling online or selling through their catalog or field sales or what have you, that they have to make improvements to their ability to fulfill and meet customers' expectations. And you know, we've all shopped through eBay and Amazon and other channels, and we all have expectations of what we want to see in terms of delivery, predictability, quality of services, and customer service. But most of these merchants are coming back to us and saying they recognize they have the need, but they don't have the capability to do it, to scale it. And even if they thought they did, they're very hesitant to make the large upfront capital investments that you have to do to make these types of scaling operations work. And so the trend has been to look for alternative providers who can do this in a model that where cost is aligned to revenue acquisition, where there's real value built into it and where there's an opportunity for merchants to scale and present a more dynamic delivery model and a more effective customer service model without having to make those massive fixed investments up front. So that idea of outsourced, managed fulfillment operations, it's an incredibly compelling story, and it's a big trend we're seeing in the marketplace. And more commonly, we're seeing especially mid-size and growing companies focusing on this as a way to allow them to take their dollars and focus more on their core competencies and what makes them great. Now, speak with me about this subject as we dig in this in a little more detail. I have Blake Vaughn, who's the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Fifth Gear. Blake is part of an extensive organization that works with customers of all shapes and sizes and provides world-class services and facilities to those merchants. And so I'm going to, in just a second, turn it over to Blake and allow him to spend a few moments introducing Fifth Gear to you, and then we'll move into the QA. So Blake, why don't you take a few moments, introduce yourself to the audience, and tell us a little bit about Fifth Gear before we get into the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. As you said, my name is Blake Vaughn. I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Fifth Gear. I've got several years of experience working in different parts of supply chain, transportation management, forecasting, planning, e-commerce fulfillment as well. So, and a lot of that on the operations side. So, going through an outline today of what you have to consider to insource versus outsource is definitely something I'm accustomed to working through, whether it's on the client side or being in a provider as we are today. Fifth Gear, as Derek mentioned, is a end-to-end e-commerce supply chain company. We focus on direct-to-consumer shipments as well as operate a pretty significant call center that handles a lot of sales and customer service work for our clients. Some of the clients that we've got on the first slide there go from monthly subscription pet box to very high-touch, high customer service operation for the American Cancer Society, jewelry, Hallmark, where we're doing a lot of high-touch and personalization work for some of their baby products, as well as operating order management systems for car parts and doing direct-to-consumer fulfillment for University of Penn State. So with that, let me walk you through some of the high level with Fifth Gear, and then we'll get into some more specific Q&A. So manage retail operations. What we try to do at Fifth Gear is have a number of different services that our customers utilize. So we handle complex order fulfillment. That's probably the first and most important piece of our business. And what complex order fulfillment is typically not just an order getting passed to us by one of our customers, but it's an order that has several lines. A lot of the what we do for our customers is personalization, whether that is gift wrapping, embroidery, engraving, and oftentimes it's not doing all of those things to all the lines of an order, but only doing some of them for certain parts of it. Personalization, like I mentioned, we do the embroidery. We've got several embroidery machines as well as impact engraving, laser engraving. We fully manage and host order management systems on behalf of our customers, so it gives them the ability to run their business without making the investment of an OMS. They can manage their purchase orders, manage their product information database that then integrates to an e-commerce front end. We operate a 250-seat customer care center that's located here in the U.S. As I mentioned, it's both a sales center as well as customer service for follow-up. We manage emails for them. We monitor social media as well as do customer follow-up based on social media comments. Freight is always an important piece of this and will continue to become a bigger and bigger piece of the e-commerce business as everybody has shifted to free shipping. Having a partner such as Fifth Gear that has a complex and sophisticated transportation management system we're able to aggregate our spend with the carriers and pass considerable savings on to our customers, and not only savings on the freight rates, but better negotiated accessorial charges, better freight selection. So if we know it's going to a certain zip code, what's the best mode to get it there the fastest and or the cheapest? And then cross-dock and cross-drop shipping. Some of our customers utilize a combination of both of these to expand their portfolio for their customers, and whether they're using our order management system or theirs, we can coordinate cross-dock and drop shipping with product that we're inventorying for our customers. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about Fifth Gear. Today we operate a little over 500,000 square feet of warehouse space. We will do well over 3 million shipments in 2014. We handle over 2 million inventoried SKUs, and that's, I think, an important stat to call out. A lot of our customers have a very wide SKU mix and not necessarily a lot of SKU depth. So we're able to handle a very complex customer that may have several 100,000 SKUs that's inventoried in our facility. Over 500 employees, over 200 customer care agents, and on average we'll personalize, that's embroidery, engraving, handwritten cards, packaging, over 20,000 products a month. Okay. Today we operate in out of 3 primary locations. Our 2 distribution centers, our first one's in Louisiana, Missouri, which is a suburb out of St. Louis, and then we also have one in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, to hit that northeast corridor. And we have call centers in both of those, as well as a third in Moberly, Missouri, which is a flow over. It gives us a different employee base to pull from. And then our corporate headquarters and technology groups located in Indianapolis. Strategically, the Missouri and Pennsylvania facilities allow us to hit 90% of the population in 3-day ground, or 4 days of Smart Post, which is a zone skip service by FedEx. So we definitely offer a good competitive geographic location to try to hit most of the customer base without utilizing a 2-day or an overnight express through a carrier. All right, next slide.
Okay.
So integrating e-commerce, definitely something we'll talk more about today. But Fifth Gear has a number of customers that use a number of e-commerce front ends. We have positioned ourselves to have integrated APIs with the big ones, the important ones. Obviously, as Derek said, Magento is a good partner of ours that we're able to go live with very little implementation and setup effort with Magento or some of the other e-commerce platforms. Customization is always out there. It typically is some type of back-end flat file that we work with, but given our time in this business, we've implemented and integrated with just about anything.
Appreciate that, Blake. So for those who know, what we wanted to do is, we've gone back through the recent conversations and looked at some of the most pressing questions people had, things that we see repeated and asked that people probe on to try to make sense and understand the potential value of a partnership with a company like Fifth Gear. And what I wanted to do is take a lot of that and Blake, walk you through some of those questions and let you give the audience kind of your take on what for us has been very recurring themes. So along those lines, I think most people kind of now have a sense of what Fifth Gear does and the different types of value you can bring to an organization, especially for those, like you said, someone who offers free shipping and they're looking to find a way to lower the cost or impact of providing that what has become a normal service, a competitive service they have to offer. But the question I get for people who start to look at this is they're not sure if they're ready for it, if they're the customer. And so what they ask is, when does it make sense for a retailer to start thinking about outsourcing their operation? How do they know that they're reaching a tipping point where what they need to do to be successful is beyond their capabilities and that what you can do offers a greater value for them than what they might do in-house? So let me take a second for that very long question and kind of give us your feedback and how you coach people on this.
Yeah, we get to see this or get this question at different times for different retailers or customers when they're looking at it, and it's oftentimes when they're experiencing some pain point. They start to feel like they've outgrown their current infrastructure. Sometimes they're not able to scale up or keep up with a spike in demand, and it's typically a seasonal demand for their business, or it's starting to take away from the focus of the company, and oftentimes it's, you know, that president, CEO, or founder is spending more and more time on the supply chain side versus what they are trying to do from a sales, marketing, merchandising side. You know, as a general rule of thumb, if your current in-house operations is inhibiting or, you know, even sabotaging your program, it's definitely time to look at outsourcing. But if you can do any type of strategic planning, you know, 12, 24 months out to try to figure out, you know, where am I going to be, so you can have the time it takes to properly vet out a supplier and come up with an implementation plan that isn't rushed, both sides are going to be better off, and you're going to have a much better transition from an in-source to an outsource.
You know, you said something, you touched on it very early in your answer, and I want to kind of repeat and highlight, because I've heard this conversation, and I want to echo it, that, you know, in the last 24 months, 3 years, a lot of merchants have invested in tools to drive demand to their site because it offers them a lower cost of sales. It gives them a wider footprint and visibility, and so they're investing in tools like digital marketing platforms, et cetera. And what they've started to see as they've become more successful, that is, as you said, you get the unpredictable spikes in demand. You know, you run a big marketing campaign, you know, during the holiday season or anything else, and now all of a sudden you're inundated with, you know, how do I keep up with this? Or do I have to start hiring in and training people like crazy to try? And what happens when that order volume drops back down after the marketing campaign's over? And so I think your point about being able to respond to those spikes is important, because we see that a lot, and it's becoming a more prevalent trend. Is that you guys see the same with your merchants that you work with as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, as we sit here in August, you know, what's on top of mind for us and most of our partners is you know, preparing for going into Q4. But, you know, what we try to do is balance out our customer base so we don't have all of our customers spiking in Q4, which gives us a little bit more flexibility. But ideally, if you're with a third-party provider, they have the ability to flex their labor across a broader set of customers. So when you do experience those spikes, whether it's a seasonal or a one-time promotion, you're not negatively impacted.
Yep, absolutely. So let me kind of take that to the next question then. When an organization looks at outsourcing, and you talked about it gives them the ability to solve challenges, to remove the distractions, or to provide scale, though, what are some of the benefits that they end up realizing on it? And how is it? What do your customers tell you after they've made the migration?
Well, you know, first and foremost, you know, there's a lot of tangible benefits. You know, those range from, the first that comes to my mind is moving from a fixed to a variable cost model. Is we talk to people that do not in-source or have never in-sourced, the first phase of that conversation is typically, well, my direct labor cost for an order is X. Can you beat that? And oftentimes the initial answer is no, because you've got to make sure you're including all of your other costs into that. But once you've transitioned, you're truly a variable. So whether your seasonality then is at the peak or the trough, your cost per order is pretty much going to stay the same, and you don't have to absorb that slack time or downtime in your warehouse, dealing with the labor changes, laying people off or bringing in temps, or hiring, letting go temps. So it becomes a much more predictable financial model for a company. Customers usually see a significant freight savings when going from an in-source to an outsource. As I mentioned in the slides, Fifth Gear has a pretty sophisticated TMS program that we run for our customers. We have the advantage of pooling all those shipments together, negotiating with the carriers, and operate a transportation program for our customers. It saves them money on the percent off of a FedEx list, but also better accessorial charges, better delivery options, better tracking as well. So integrating that shipment data back into their orders. So again, freight savings is typically a conversation we have very early on with somebody that's looking at outsourcing. Decrease in overhead costs as well, right? As your operations grow, you've got to have systems to run it. You've got to have people to run that, and your overhead will continue to go up, and that's fine as long as your business is always moving up and to the right. But when there are troughs in that, there's a lot of overhead that companies have got to absorb in there. And then on the other side, right, the intangible one, the biggest benefit that many retailers find from outsourcing is just that ability to then focus back on the basics of why they probably got into that business, which is merchandising, trying to grow the business, and find new products to go sell to their customers. And it allows them to typically free up not just time but capital to go and do those things.
So this is the question, the kind of the rhetorical one I get back, and I think it's merchants often confuse when they talk about operational experience. I think your point about what is their core competency, what did they get into business to begin with, is great. And the question is, shouldn't retailers be trying to control as much of their operational experience as possible? We've all probably grown up in an environment where that was traditionally the case, that the merchant owned it in-house and the retailer was responsible for being good at that. And so they have that predisposition that that's the case. But what are your thoughts around that?
I mean, absolutely. We at Fifth Gear totally agree with that. And, down to our mission statement, we try to make sure that the retailer does retain control of that. And just because you outsource it shouldn't mean that you have to give up any control if you've got the right partner. We approach it that whenever we launch a new customer or a new program for a customer, we get very specific and specialized standard operating procedures. And I think that's just the difference of finding the right partner that can be creative and that can drive customized solutions versus a standard everyday run-of-the-mill 3PL partner that is going to take an order and ship a box. That is typically also followed on that price curve, though. So you're going to typically pay a little bit more of a premium for somebody that can be flexible, that can be specialized and help you drive your brand, versus somebody that's just going to move boxes onto a FedEx or a UPS truck. Our job as a fulfillment partner is to make sure that those things run as smoothly, as efficiently as possible, to make so they're always there to work and deliver products for the customers.
In your experience, and I think the question is, we understand kind of some of the value in doing it. Are there scenarios, though, where it doesn't make sense to outsource this, where you would look at a retailer or merchant or whoever and say, you know what, you're probably better owning this one in-house or doing what you're doing?
Well, of course, we're probably a little biased here on that question, but we do come across it. Oftentimes, it's when a retailer or company has a highly specialized operation, maybe is using equipment that can't easily be purchased by a provider or moved to a provider, has maybe a lot of hands-on intellectual property that goes along with creating that product somehow. And so if those scenarios exist, it's maybe a little bit more of a complicated outsourcing decision. But typically, you're dealing with a finished good, then that math equation and that decision matrix of in-source, outsource, I think holds true for just about everybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, at a high level, what does a retailer do to integrate with Fifth Gear or a managed fulfillment partner? I mean, what is that process, or what are the steps, or what have you around that?
Well, that's typically a very specific answer to the set of circumstances and systems that a retailer is using. It really depends on that e-commerce platform, which is why Fifth Gear's tried to go ahead and set up APIs for most of the major ones. First and foremost, you want to make sure you've selected that provider that supports integration to your site. So, Magento being one that we both mutually work together with, we've got the ability to quickly go live with inventory status, order shipping status, being able to support a complex order with personalization. And so, Magento has been a great platform for us to integrate with because how much our customers can customize it, as well as the pretty deep user base that's out there. The more important step is during that implementation process is making sure, whether it's Fifth Gear or somebody else, that you really spend the upfront time to scope out the integration points, the reports, as well as specific processes that are unique, that when we turn the switch on and go live, that we're able to start shipping orders from day one and not have to do a slow ramp up. Because there's a ton of information that goes back and forth for these orders, and we spend typically a 90-day ramp or implementation period to make sure that we can go live without any hiccups.
So then, the magic question we all care about, does a retailer save money by outsourcing their operations?
Yeah, as I said earlier, the first part is enabling to switch to a variable cost model. I can't stress that enough. That that first conversation is typically, hey, can you beat my X dollar per unit? But as you start peeling back the onion, there's times that retailers may or may not save money, but they're also looking at the level of service, the ability to scale both long-term as well as short-term spikes, and making sure they understand that total cost of the in-house operation. There's not just the direct labor. There's also the rent. More importantly, the systems to run it. As that those companies start to mature, the system that they started and have typically modified as they've gone on for some period of time is not going to support going from a 5,000 a month order up to 20, 30, or 40,000 orders a month, and it just won't scale. So you've got to look at typically $1 million+ investments just on software to be able to scale up, let alone facility. Oftentimes, another part of that conversation of comparing in-source versus outsource is the point in time that companies are looking, like I mentioned, is when things are very busy, very full, and so they're often running in what I'd say the most efficient place is. They've got a facility, they're operating at almost peak capacity, so they're highly efficient at that point from a cost per unit. Until you start to go over capacity. And so you then have to think about, okay, if I've got to take down the next 20, 50, 100,000 square feet, what is that going to cost me? And so when you start to mix in some of those large capital expenditures and how that impacts the cost per unit, that's where I really think the outsourcing becomes a lot more competitive on a cost per unit basis, because you don't just go from 100% down to 90% capacity. When you take down that next 100,000 square feet or 50,000 square feet, you quickly have to carry a lot more overhead for a long period of time, unless you've got a really aggressive ramp plan going on.
Mm-hmm. I think you said the three things that when people ask me about this that are the drivers of the conversation. They said, one, the merchants who are looking at how do they get leverage by your partnership or, an outsourced partner's relationship with the carriers to save on freight, because competitively they have to adjust their freight models to compete with other people in an online marketplace. As you said, the capital expenditures, most people who come to us asking about it, it's because they have reached a point where they know they're going to make significant investments, and that takes away from the rest of the operation there. And as you said, the ability to align costs to the seasonality of the business and have it proportional and not have that wasted overhead, that burden, if you will, that they maintain year-round. Those are the three things I hear all the time. So to hear you say them as well, it makes sense. It echoes everything we hear on our side. So in terms of, we're talking kind of a business case on those lines. When we get into the idea of once it's in place and they've gone through that 90-day ramp cycle, what does managed operations really mean to the retailer? What's being managed, what's being done, and kind of what's their involvement in that going forward?
Well, for us, managed operations really means the outsourcing of, some or all aspects of that supply chain or post-purchase process, starting with order fulfillment, could mean the contact center, or value-added services in the transportation management. Not everybody outsources all of those pieces. Sometimes they like to retain the contact center, but for the most part, that's what managed operations means to us. Is that retailer working with an outside provider who handles those day-to-day tasks for them, so they can focus on the core part of their business. I think the key thing is that the retailer doesn't have to worry about these. I won't say any, but they don't have to worry about them as much because we've got, they've got a whole company focused on that. One of the ways Fifth Gear tries to differentiate ourselves and help the retailer is we've got a pretty robust client success group that, no matter how big or how small the customer is, they have a dedicated team that is focusing on their business, tracking daily, weekly, monthly KPIs, reviewing the business with their counterpart at the retailer to make sure that changes in the business are discussed, implemented in the operations, and vice versa.
So for the merchant who decides to outsource, what are the qualities and attributes they should be looking at when they go through that evaluation and they're looking at an outsourcing provider? How do they make a judgment on who's good and who's a good fit?
Well, I think the most important thing for someone to look for is if that company shares their brand vision and can really help them grow their business. One thing they could ask themselves is, can they scale the operations to meet your needs as they change? So if you're going to introduce new service attributes to a fulfillment operation, can they handle that? Do they have services in place that can help you grow, such as value adds or additional delivery options that you don't have? Can their process ensure that their brand experience is consistent for all the customers? From when they hit their site to when that box shows up, meaning, packaging, labels, box inserts, branded tape, those types of things. And so as you go and vet out a company and, absolutely do the site tour, I think it gives you a good flavor for their ability to do that. One thing we don't recommend is making the decision on price alone. Like I mentioned earlier, that spectrum of a very simple 3PL ship a box to a higher touch definitely has, price sensitivity to that. And oftentimes, you're going to get what you pay for in that business. Being in the e-commerce business, there's a lot of change. It's very dynamic. And you've got to make sure you've got a partner that is there in the trenches with you to react to those things.
Second there. And then When we look at, when a merchant or retailer looks at different outsourcing partners, is there an advantage? You guys have your own technology and systems that you have built and grown over the years, and as you said, from the transit management to the contact center, everything else. Is there a benefit to working with someone who has their own proprietary technology? Does it make a difference?
Well, we think it gives us a competitive advantage. If you look across the marketplace, there's a mixture. Some of our competitors use off the shelf, but from what I've seen, and being in this industry for many years, is when you've created and we continue to invest in our own technology, it really gives you a full understanding of e-commerce and a clear view into all parts of the process. And even more importantly, it gives us the flexibility to make changes, to do customized work for our customers, and really driving our own destiny from an IT side, and at a lower cost often, because we're not going back to a software company to ask them to change core code, waiting for a release date that may affect their other customer base. So we like to think that it is a competitive advantage for us, if nothing else, from a flexibility standpoint.
Absolutely. I think that ability that you allude to, that allows you to make your own, chart your own course, and make calculated, planned improvements, and be able to offer that to the base. You probably have a fair degree amount of flexibility and control than, as you said, someone who is dependent on a third party for those types of things. So when someone's looking at that, then you've given kind of criteria of what to look for in a provider. We talked about the technology. What are the features that many merchants or retailers already have perspective that, okay, someone's going to take my order, they're going to pick, pack, ship, but what are some of the other features they should be looking at or considering in terms of areas that their operation might improve by that they don't necessarily consider right up front?
Yeah, I think making sure they've got APIs available to integrate with a supply chain partner as well as the e-commerce platform. It sometimes is overlooked on that back end. One that's easy to overlook until later is, think about the ability for that system to operate at a call center. Ideally, that call center should be able to use that order management platform during the call, so it's a faster lookup, more accurate inventory information that they're maybe discussing with the customer. If not, oftentimes you've got to create an API for a call center. That can lead to latency times, incorrect information, versus the ability for the call center to use that. Another one is making sure that that order management system can support multiple brands or multiple divisions. We've seen with our customers that as time goes on, they may want to launch a second or third brand or create a new division with different pricing structure. And being able to do that easily without creating an entire new instance saves a lot of time, money as well. Making sure that you can support customization if that fits your business model, or personalization. And again, why that is important, and I've mentioned it a couple times today, is if you've got an order with multiple units, not all of those units might be customized, but the ability to track that order and make sure that that single order ships in one box to the customer is important, not just from a cost perspective, but I think also a customer service perspective, so they get the entire shipment in one box versus spread over 2 or 3 different shipments.
Yep, agreed. So, Blake, those are the questions that we had submitted that I wanted to go through, and I appreciate your taking time to do that. Any kind of final parting thoughts you want to leave with the group or the audience before we move on?
Well, I appreciate everybody's time today, and Derek for you organizing this. We understand that this decision process is oftentimes a complicated one, not as simple as just figuring out dollars sense, but also an emotional one that involves people. And we don't take it lightly, but definitely, the more you can do from a strategic planning standpoint, so when these decisions do get made, time to vet out the right partner and put together a good transition plan is going to pay off many times over when it's time to go live.
Yeah, the things you said a number of things, and I want to echo them before we wrap things up, that most organizations that we speak to, regardless of whether we initially work with them on e-commerce or CRM or in other areas, the focus on driving online sales, about reducing the cost of sales per order, the cost of fulfillment, they're all critical, because most companies over the last 5 or 6 years they've felt the pain of when they had to be efficient, and they felt the burden when they did have those massive fixed costs and investments that they had to basically pay for and underwrite, regardless of what was happening in the marketplace. And the changes that we're seeing, where mid-market, enterprise, and as your first slide said, even in some cases, startups, right? It's really allowed companies to invest intelligently, and that affects profitability. It affects, employee compensation. It affects organizational stability and security. And so, while when we think about e-commerce topics, this isn't necessarily the first one that comes to mind, but what we're seeing is it's the most impactful and transformational for many companies in the process. So thanks again, Blaine, for taking a few moments to talk about this with us. And for those on the phone, if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them for you, and we'll follow up with you. But we will, again, we'll be making this recording available online so that everyone can come pull it down and view any parts you have questions. And we invite everyone to contact Blake or myself with anything that we can do to answer for you at any time as well. And without any other questions, I think we've got everything covered. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Blake, thanks for your time, and for everyone on the phone, thank you very much. We hope you have a great afternoon.